do they want to destabilize the region now again? Then we have this period of more of a quiet for a while now, and then all of a sudden this comes up, at least from my perspective, out of nowhere. Why do you think this is being done at this particular time?
Well, I think what's happening is that we've seen over the last couple of years, there's been attempts by NATO and the Western power elite to get wars going in the Middle East. We've had a big attempt to sort of demonise the Iranians, and there's all sorts of other things going on around the world. We've got the India-Pakistan problem brewing away. We've also got North Korea, South Korea problems. But these, it seems, has been put on the back burner for a bit by just concentrating on domestic stuff. And of course, Ireland is about as close as it gets. Now, don't forget, of course, that Ireland was the first ever country to leave the British Empire. It was the sort of leader, really, in the
breakout group,
to sort of get the British Empire to start to put an end to it. And fair play to the Irish for getting that all going. Because it was the British Empire it was a sort of we were very smart, Britain, as an empire, in that we will go into countries and sort of sort out their water system, give them something, but then we would be taking, like the Romans, taking the tribute from around the world. But the Irish had had enough of this over the years, and they'd had enough of the plantations bringing people in. It's the sort of stuff we've seen of course, now in Israel, in the Middle East, bringing people in from outside and creating a lot of tension. I can remember, because having lived over in Northern Ireland, seeing a lot of comparisons between Israel, Palestine, and Northern Ireland.
Well,
at the time, this is back in the mid '90s, early '90s.
Yeah.
I remember scratching my head, thinking, "Well, is this really the same as Israel, Palestine? What's going on here?"
Well, Tony, just look at the symbolism as well of the Ulster flags and things like that. Star of David, red hands. What's going on there?
Yeah, there's a lot of symbolism, and a lot of this is the Orange Order, which of course connects back to Bernhard and the Dutch royal family. You've got a lot of similarity between the Star of David on these symbols, and this is a link to the high, Royal Arch Masonic type activity, where you see the same symbols in the Royal Arch lodges on the carpets.
Yeah.
So you've got, it seems to me, a sort of an attempt to destabilise the peace in Britain here, and I think it's been wonderful to see that the people have come together marching against this in public, and we've had Catholics standing next to Protestant and condemning it, which is great. It's one of the first times I can ever remember since the Troubles first started under the role of Bilderberg Chairman Peter Carrington when he was Defence Secretary, which is when the Troubles started. Back in the late 60s and early 70s, and Bloody Sunday, that it's the first time that I've actually seen Catholics, that I can remember, Catholics and Protestants of both the Republicans and the Loyalists standing it together and saying, "Well, look, we're not having this. Absolutely not." So it's been great to see that.
That's very good. Just quickly, do you think that people can stop this from happening? What I'm thinking about is people have their own kind of, if you know what I mean, intelligence network, meaning that when people who are smart and up to speed and realizing what is going on and potentially how other groups are manipulating the region, do you think that could be something that helps to put a stop to this kind of activity?
Yeah, I think so. I think what it's done is it's reignited a lot of discussion about the Force Research Unit and about British Army intelligence involvement in Northern Ireland, which is almost sort of healing the wound of last weekend with these three murdered security people, the two army guys and the Catholic policeman. That is the salve which will sort this out. Is if people remember and go over what the British have done over there, and I think then for the soldiers to see this sort of thing as well, and for the forces to understand that there is some genuine, shall we say, traitors in their midst. I mean, we've got this guy, Brigadier Gordon Kerr, who was involved in all that stuff. He was investigated by John Stevens, and there was a lot of attacks on John Stevens when he was investigating all this dodgy activity, collaboration between the terrorists and the British security forces. So anyway, at least that's been looked into. But Gordon Kerr has apparently been shipped off as one of the more clandestine British Army units, actually over to Iraq, and so it looks like he's the sort of guy that if he was to step back on British soil, he may even be arrested after the Stevens inquiry, because he was clearly shown to be actually making things worse over there. And of course, we don't need a lot of these sort of intelligence people. We don't need them. I mean, if the police are doing their job well and properly, and the police service of Northern Ireland is much better than the old RUC used to be, and with more equal numbers of Catholics and Protestants, even though it's still sort of led by the Orange Order, Sir Hugh Orde. There are prospects for peace in Ireland. And it does seem that there's been a very, very good, robust, sensible, intelligent response from people in the north and south of Ireland.
Do you think that this could have anything to do with the fact that Ireland voted no for the Lisbon Treaty? This is kind of on a weird level. Retaliation stuff is going on.
I think it's more that the power elite are looking at the Western countries now and thinking we need to destabilise our own home territory.
Yes.
So that we can bring clampdowns on civil liberties here at home, so we can then get on and extend our wars abroad. So I don't know. It's like the way I see it may sound a little bit simplistic, but I see it as like the Eye of Sauron in the Lord of the Rings.
It's a good
analogy. For a while, it's concentrating on one battle that's going on somewhere abroad, maybe in in Gaza for a while, and then it's concentrating on something else. So the eyes can't be everywhere at once.
That's a good analogy. I totally agree with you there. How about you've been involved here in media ethics, as it were. How about their participation in all of this as well?
Well, of course, the media is key and in understanding what's going on, because there's been a kind of covert takeover of the media without the public realising. I mean, we had for years here in Britain, the BBC was a very open and accountable public service. Now it's slowly morphed into this kind of propaganda outfit, which is has certain very important events that are taking place in Britain and around the world, which it just simply misreports consistently in a propagandistic, repetitive fashion. Having seen this sort of at the sharp end, it's much easier for someone like myself to see this going on and the changes. I mean, I was actually working for the BBC whilst the John Burt changes were coming through. That's something called producer choice, which was essentially a kind of market system within the corporation. And I mean, I was there when you could literally phone up any department in the BBC and everyone would just sort of cooperate with everybody else if they had the time, and which they usually did, because the place was well organised. And then what John Burt brought in after the sacking of Alistair Mill in the mid-80s was this sort of whole form-filling culture. And now we've got the situation where we've got some very, very important stuff which is just simply not being covered. I mean, I'm talking about things like 9/11, we're talking about 7/7, the attack on London in 2005, 52 people killed. We're talking about things like the Princess Diana, death of Princess Diana, which looks increasingly even more after the inquest to have been an assassination by MI6, or certainly in collaboration with other intelligence services, possibly. And things like the Bilderberg meetings, which are becoming more and more significant and still not being covered by mainstream press here, and stuff to do with the Freemason, the power of the Masons, secret societies, and the occult. Now, of course, anybody that looks at the origins of fascism in World War II would be looking all over the occult and the Theosophists. I mean, there's some really good books on the subject. Probably the best I've come across is Peter Levender's Unholy Alliance, which it really pulls apart the occult significance of the birth and the sort of hatching, the spawning of Hitler and Nazism. And so anybody that's not taking any attention of that, seeing it all as some sort of wacky, kooky conspiracy or a little bit too frightening, is betraying their profession, really, because I think we need to be looking at all these things and understanding them if we're going to be an honest media. And of course, there's an increasing corporatization of the press. So there's, I mean, this was why Rupert Murdoch's actions were so significant in the mid-80s. Murdoch came in, he bought up the Times, newspaper, which was on its knees at the strike, and then he brought up also the News of the World and the Sun newspapers in Britain here. And he what he did was he was very smart. He broke the back of the British media legislation that had tried to make sure that no company could own television channels, newspapers, and all that sort of thing. So that they would only be allowed to own one outlet each, and then there was the BBC kind of hovering in the background just to kind of keep everything sensible. In the mid-'80s, Margaret Thatcher and the Tories, they really did smash the newspaper unions. They also got rid of a lot of the legislation to do with making sure that there was a plural media. And now what we're seeing is a kind of end game with these big media corporations that now exist in Britain eating each other up and also sacking lots and lots of journalists, because they're saying, oh, well, there's no advertising money anymore, and we just can't afford you. So, and what, of course, they do is they keep the journalists who write things they like, and they get rid of the journalists who write things they don't like. And this is a dreadful situation, and it's not being reported on at all, of course, in most newspapers or anywhere.
But I feel that they ultimately are killing their own profession. They're killing themselves slowly, as it were. And I think that all these people who have been denied by working ethically and with morals within the media, they will set up their own shop, if you know what I mean. We have the web information spreading.
It's not that easy because you need to have an income, and also many of the journalists, mainstream journalists, have been following a lot of stuff to do with 9/11. But maybe the other stuff they haven't, So it's really, if we had what we really kind of need in the UK is media proprietors that are prepared to take this kind of stuff on board, and there's precious few. I mean, there are some, you have to search around, mostly on the internet and on. For example, there's a program called Edge Media Television on the Sky satellite that does a lot of really good investigative work. But you see, investigative journalism has been killed stone dead. It's really only now almost all opinion pieces by people who are sort of quite right-wing generally. I mean, Mark Steele, for example, in The Guardian, who's a left-wing journalist, who's actually a brilliant comic writer as well. He's been looking at Gaza. He's been looking at the arrests of Muslims in Britain and written some really scathing pieces about the fascist tactics of the police, the racism within the police, and actually being quite satirical and scathing about them. And the independent newspaper refused to print it, even though the guy's a weekly columnist. So we're seeing some real propagandistic sort of turning of the screws in the British press, so that there are certain really important things going on the British public are just simply not going to get to know about via their newspapers anymore.
What about if we zoom out a bit and take a look at the broader picture? Where do you see things are heading, Tony?
Well, it's difficult to know, of course. I've got no crystal ball here, but you can see that with the reduction of civil liberties, with we've had this sort of militarization thing through 9/11, 7/7, concentrating the public on terrorism, whenever that looks like. Of course, 7/7 itself. It's the sort of the domestic version of 9/11, I suppose. Took place on a weekend with the G8 summit up in Glen Eagles, where there was a big concentration on solving world poverty. Now that, of course, was completely smashed when the 7/7 event happened, and everyone's suddenly then talking about terrorism. And it did seem like a sort of quite a diabolical kind of way to shift the agenda at this big international summit to make it all about terrorism again and forget the debt forgiveness. But of course, the banking frauds and scams are all coming home to roost right now, and so we're seeing two things happening together, which is two very dangerous things.
Do you see?
Most importantly, the sort of taking away of civil liberties. All I can say is that we're heading towards some kind of sort of social and economic crisis, and I just hope that at least some of the institutions around Europe and around the rest of the world, but particularly Europe and America, where a lot of this stuff is focused, are take advantage of this and use it as a way to engineer a better society. It's like